To free speech balanced with the right of a private media company like A&E. Ellen Ratner, a talk radio news service bureau chief, is joining us. Jim Pinkerton, a contributing editor and writer for the American Conservative magazine, both Fox News contributors and both great friends of us and of each other. So it's nice to have you all on this. It's a very interesting topic. There's a lot of directions to take it. In general, Ellen, what do you think of this?
Well, I think actually that Phil needs to apologize and then move on. A lot of people say things that are offensive or upsetting on television or radio, and we all make mistakes, and he just needs to apologize. He offended a whole group of people. In terms of the religious aspect, there are lots of gay churches that follow Christ. Lots of Metropolitan Community Church being one of them. Dignity, a Catholic group. So I think that it doesn't mean that people aren't following Christ just because they happen to be gay or homosexual or have a child that's gay or homosexual.
Jim, what do you think about that? An apology and just move on. Is that the end of it?
Well, I don't think it will be the end of it. I should say I don't agree with what Robertson said, but I do defend his right to say it. There is such a thing as free speech. I agree with Sarah Palin and Governor Jindal on that. I think, however, you will see a little test here of the power of the professional outrage groups to force Phil Robertson off the air forever. I'm sure that's their goal, unless he completely abases themselves to him, which of course is possible. But I suspect what we're seeing here is just a power play and a kind of a purge of Southern white Christian patriotic culture out of TV, and meanwhile people like William Lajeunesse also could have mentioned Alec Baldwin, who's been an angry homophobe, and of course is still doing TV commercials.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that about the South and about Christianity and conservatism as well. Ellen, I'd like to ask you about that. This is all based on one GQ piece where the reporter definitely had a point of view going into this piece, and in some ways one could argue he almost approached it like an anthropologist going in to see these strange bearded men in Louisiana who have Fox News on, who sell duck calls, who have a cache of deadly weapons, and who is surprised, the reporter in this piece, that they don't sell rifles. I mean, how could shocked that they don't sell rifles? So is this actually a fair portrayal of this person, or is this in some ways an unfair critique of a Southern Christian?
Well, I will say this, that look, Phil got himself in hot water with his remarks. There's no question about that. On the other hand, obviously the GQ reporter did have a point of view. He used his free speech rights to do that. Now Phil can come out with his point of view, but again, you can't be saying anymore, you know, the Bible was used to justify slavery at one point. You can't really be putting down a group of people in this day and age. This is the year 2013, very different place than it was when some of these people made remarks in the early 90s.
Well, Jim, interesting. This is also another quote from the article. William read the quote that a lot of folks have issue with, and it's very controversial. Here's another quote that Phil also said just a paragraph later. He said, quote, "We never ever judge someone on who's going to heaven, hell. That's the Almighty's job. We just love them, give them the good news about Jesus, whether they're homosexuals, drunks, terrorists. We let God sort them out later. You see what I'm saying?"
That's Christian faith right there. And again, it's not everybody's interpretation of it, but it's his interpretation, and he represents a lot of people. Look, the show is extremely popular, and for a reason, because it strikes a chord with the American public, and it would be a shame if A&E gets terrorized into throwing him off the show.
Well, I agree. Well, Jim and I do agree that he shouldn't be thrown off the show if he apologizes. Look, this is a forgiveness season. We're all into that. And I can even forgive him, but he has to say to the American people, particularly the gay lesbian community, that he's sorry for what he said. It was not right.
Ellen, where is A&E on this, though? Here they've made millions of dollars off of this program, and they have let this family be who they are and talk about faith and talk about family. Does it surprise you that an A&E person wasn't around, who wasn't aware of this interview, if it was such a franchise that they so deeply wanted to protect that they're going to suspend one of their stars? I
don't understand why the A&E person wasn't sitting in the interview, and that's often done, be it congressional interviews or media interviews, where you have your PR person with something that records the interview. And it's also surprising that they're so silent about this. Not a good idea, but they want to protect their audience, and they're making money. It's a lot about making money.
But Jim, what is the precedent that set as well? If you're asked your opinion on something and you're a celebrity or you're anybody, an individual, are you not allowed to give it, or is it the word choice? I mean, if he just chose the wrong words here and he should have been a little bit more censored.
Look, you're perfectly free to give your opinion as long as you agree with the dominant mainstream media culture. Then, of course, they love it. You're perfectly free to say that you love Obama and that you love the United Nations and you worry about the penguins and global warming. You're totally free on that. Unless it's just, if you say something they don't want to hear, that's when they put the knife in you.
Ellen, you say he needs to apologize. What does that need to look like?
I think it needs to say, look, I'm sorry if I offended anybody. I do have my religious beliefs, but I believe that gay members and lesbian members of our society should have equal rights and the ability to not have people be prejudiced or put them in the same sentence as bestiality. I mean, that's really what was so offensive.
Amen to that.
If he doesn't, that's the other question. This has been one of the big breakout hits of 2014. What do you think this means for the franchise overall, Jim?
Well, I think that's where A&E really does. You were quite right in saying they should have interfered with GQ getting close to these people to begin with. Obviously, there was no way that interview was going to turn out well. Now, of course, the family it's kind of on their own. I mean, they turned down a chance to be on Barbara Walters because they wanted to go duck hunting. So they're clearly operating on their own wavelength down there in West Monroe, Louisiana, as compared to New York City, and that's of course one reason why the show is popular. Look, I think
a lot of our viewers, by the way, Jim, were probably like, "Yeah, right, that was probably a good decision."
Exactly, it was sort of it's in keeping with who they are.
I love those ducks.
That's what makes them so. Look, the show, we should say, is funny and patriotic and charming and good-natured, and I think A&E will have to show some leadership here and sort of broker this, because I don't think they want to hide that. They don't want to antagonize anybody here in Manhattan, but they also don't want to lose their probably a more like billion-dollar franchise now.
Well, I think they're hiding some of their prejudice by trying to kind of look cool with the, red, white, and blue bandana and all that. I'm not sure I agree with you on that show.
Interesting. Well, again, it's interesting to note who wrote it, the point of view that they have, what they're bringing to the table, and how that becomes media attention nationwide. It's one article, one comment, and it'll be interesting if Phil Robertson comes out, has anything more to say. Ellen, Jim, it's great to have you. Thanks for the conversation.
So
big story. We'll be sharing some of our viewer comments throughout the next hour or so. Thank you.
A&E needs the Robertsons more than the Robertsons need A&E.
That's an interesting point, John. Could they take the show?
I wouldn't be surprised to see the whole family walk off. Say, forget it. You don't want Phil on? We're dumping it.
One wonders what the Suns will do
My
in this
prediction.
situation. All right, well, you heard it here first, folks.